Welcome to The Bridge. I'm your host, Kira Young, and I have a special guest today that I'm really excited to talk to. His name is Abraham Bolden. Welcome to The Bridge.
Thank you very much, Kira. And I'd like to begin this by thanking Almighty God, too, for His blessings and being able to talk with you today.
Great. So let's start with, we're going to have two different types of people in our audience. One is going to be people who know your story, and the other is going to be people who don't know your story and how accomplished you are and the things that happened to you in your life. So why don't you start from the beginning and tell us about first being the first black detective in Chicago and then going into the Secret Service.
Well, let me just begin by saying this. I was a young man born in East St. Louis, Illinois, back in 1935. My mother had 8 children. I was the middle boy. Now, I attended Lincoln High School in East St. Louis, Illinois, graduated from Lincoln High School with emphasis on music. I was a trumpet player. Now, I graduated, as I said, from Lincoln High School, and I went from there to Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri, where I received a Bachelor of Arts degree in music composition. Now, one of my main goals in life had always been to become a policeman or one who would be engaged in law enforcement. Now, the very reason that I majored in music is because I became a very good musician and played with several of the dance bands around East St. Louis, and I won a scholarship to both Middleton University and Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. So that was one of the avenues that I had to use to go to college, simply because my father had so many of us in college at the same time. Well, after I graduated from Lincoln University in 1956, I graduated cum laude in a class of 95, and I got married in 1955, 1 year before that I graduated from college. Of course, that made it very difficult. But I went from there I had a job that was offered to me in southern Missouri, which was in Hayti, Missouri, which is a small town near Charleston, Missouri, for a teaching position. And at that same time, there was an advertisement in a newspaper for an agent for the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. So now I had a choice to make, and I chose to take the policeman route, the detective route, even though I didn't have too much confidence that Pinkerton would hire a black agent because there hadn't been any up until that time.
Right.
Yes, go ahead.
So you were the first one in the program?
Yes, I was the first African-American detective for Pinkerton National Detective Agency. And I got it because my wife happened to be reading the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And she noticed that they were asking to hire an investigator for the Pinkerton National Detective Agency. Well, I grew up at a time when St. Louis and East St. Louis were very prejudiced little towns. We still had the black and white drinking fountains. We still had segregated toilet facilities. We still had segregated movies. The only difference between the Deep South and East St. Louis during the 40s and 50s was a question of location. But some of the rules and regulations were the same. Now, when I first went over and applied for the job for Pinkerton National Detective, the secretary didn't want to give me an application because of my race. But my wife had already told me to be persistent. And she had given me the clip where Pinkerton was hiring the detective. And I told the secretary that as I showed her the clipping from the newspaper, that Pinkerton was indeed hiring she still refused me to give an application until Mr. Mertz, who was the district director at that time, intervened in the conversation, told her to give me an application. I was interviewed by Mr. Mertz, and I became the first African American Pinkerton National Detective. Now, I thought that was quite an honor, but the wife knew that we needed a little bit more finance because we had a young daughter on the way, and what I was earning at Pinkerton National Detective Agency was not serving to sustain us very well. So the Illinois State Police were hiring, and my wife saw that in the newspaper, and she told me about it and asked me, why don't you apply for the Illinois State Police? And this was in 1956 at the latter part of the year. So I applied for the Illinois State Police, went to the Illinois State Police training school in Springfield, Illinois, and graduated in 1957 and became the Illinois State Trooper. Now, in my experience as the Illinois State Trooper, I gained quite a bit of investigative experience because at times I was assigned to the Vice Squad. And the Vice Squad did quite a bit of detective work so far as narcotics and different prostitution, gambling, and things like that. So that gave me quite a bit of experience in doing flat-out police work. During my time there in the Illinois State Police, President Kennedy was running for president of the United States. And on his schedule, he was to visit Peoria, Illinois, where I was stationed as the Illinois State Policeman. So when the president came to Peoria, Illinois, I happened to be standing by the airport, Peoria Airport, and I was the one who stopped the traffic for the big, long Lincoln automobile that he was riding on the back of. And I waved at the president at that time, and I saw his security was riding behind him. And I thought that was very interesting because I had read about the United States Secret Service and what their duties were. And as fate would have it, I had an opportunity to work with Mr. Fred Backstrom, who was the special agent in charge for the Springfield, Illinois office of the United States Secret Service. He encouraged me to apply for the United States Secret Service. I applied and was appointed an agent of the United States Secret Service in on October 30th of 1960 under President Eisenhower. Well, we know that President Kennedy won the election over Nixon, and he beat Nixon in Cook County by some 8,000 votes, and that put him over so far as his presidential number count was concerned. And President Kennedy became, in fact, the President of the United States of America. Now, the President had scheduled a meeting here in Chicago at McCormick Place, which is the convention center here in Chicago on Cermak Road. And this dinner was in honor of the President's victory and to also honor the men, the aldermen, and the political people who had done the footwork in order to put President Kennedy over the top in order for him to defeat Nixon. Now, when they were giving out the assignments in the building in the office of the United States Secret Service, they assigned me to the washroom, which was on the lower level of McCormick Place, and which was below the convention hall in the dining room where the president was supposed to be. Now, that was very disappointing because the first assignment, they had placed a Chicago policeman there, a uniformed Chicago policeman, and they had in fact discussed how difficult it would be for an agent to hold that position because an agent would be wearing plain clothes, and where policemen, uniformed policemen, attracted the attention because he was in uniform. But when they changed and put me there, that gave me double trouble because here I am, a young black man, and I'm asking the people not to use this certain washroom that had been set aside for the President of the United States. Well, around 8 o'clock, 8:30, the President arrived at McCormick Place. I heard a big fanfare upstairs, the band struck up, "Here Comes the President," and cameras were flashing, and I was sort of disappointed because I wanted to see the President of the United States, and from my position, that would have been impossible, so I thought. But as I stood there with my desire to see the President, I looked at the top of the steps, I looked up to the top of the steps, and lo and behold, here comes the President of the United States. The first thing that he wanted to do when the motorcade stopped was use the washroom, and there I stood. And it was just a quirk of fate, because now the President, instead of walking immediately into the washroom, he stopped and he smiled at me, and I thought that I might have been blocking him from entering the washroom, so I stepped to the side and he stepped to the side also, keeping his eyes on my eyes. And he looked at me and he asked me, he said, "Are you a Secret Service agent? Are you one of Mayor Daley's finest?" I said, "I'm a Secret Service agent, Mr. President." And one of the agents who had accompanied him from Washington, D.C., that's Agent Bolden. And he's with the Secret Service here in Chicago. And the President looked at me and he smiled, a very generous smile and a very sincere smile, too. I took a liking to him right away. He looked me in the eye and asked me, he says, "Mr. Bolden," he says, "has there ever been a Secret Service agent appointed to the presidential detail in Washington, D.C.? I looked around at some of the other agents who were with him. I said, "Not to my knowledge, Mr. President." And he surprised me. He said, "Would you like to be the first?" I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. President." And I was just shocked. And we shook hands, and I just can't explain it. Every time that I have to go through it, I get chills all through my body to shake hands with such a man who had such idealist attitudes and things that he wanted to accomplish for the American people. I just thought so much of him. So after he came out of the washroom, we shook hands again, and he walked upstairs and into the convention hall. Well, the President had told me that he would be looking forward to seeing me in Washington, D.C. while we were discussing whether or not I was a Secret Service agent, and I told him that I was, and he said, "In fact, I'll be looking forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C." So that indicated to me that he was going to put something in the works in order to have me called to Washington, D.C. and placed on the United States Secret Service White House detail. And that, in fact, happened on June the 6th of 1961. I became the first African American assigned to the United States Secret Service detail in Washington, D.C. And that was a milestone in my life. I was very, very happy about that, and it gave me a certain sense of responsibility that I indeed could serve my country and my fellow Americans in such a capacity. And I really appreciated that the President of the United States had recognized some of the inequalities that were going on around him and was indeed trying to rectify some of these things that were burning issues in America at that time.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It's very moving story.
Yes, it was for me too, because the President to me signified everything that we needed at the time. There were race riots all across the country. America was in a period of transition. It was in a period of upheaval. There were the Birmingham bus riots. There were people who were being lynched, shot, and everything was happening. And here comes a man who I believe, sincerely thought that he could make a contribution to the American people and solve some of these situations. Although I thought at times that he was moving a little slow, but however, always thought that he was sincere in doing the best that he could. Now, the president, when he appointed me as the first African American Secret Service agent, and I arrived in Washington, D.C. on the 6th, I had an occasion to be standing outside of the president's door on detail after I'd been there for about a week, and the president had just left the cabinet meeting, a conference of the big dignitaries, the Secretary of State, and all the most powerful people in Washington, D.C. And I would have had an assignment outside the president's door, Oval Office door. And when one of the senators came out, Senator Hubert Humphrey, he forgot to close the office door, Oval Office door. So I reached inside to close the door. And much to my surprise, the president looked up and said, "Mr. Bolden, I see that you made it here." And I was just flattered that he remembered my name. And here's a man, he had all kinds of decisions to make. He had much on his mind. He had the Dr. Martin Luther King situation. He had the Vietnam situation. And here is the President of the United States called me Mr. Bolden. And he wanted to know, had I met his brother, Robert Kennedy, who had been standing there talking with him when I reached in to close the door. And we looked around, and Robert Kennedy, who was then the Attorney General of the United States, had left office. But the president proceeded to take me around and introduce me to many of his cabinet members, and also Hubert Humphrey and Barry Goldwater. And when he came to Pierre Salinger, who was his press secretary at that time. Now, President Kennedy had appointed Andrew Hatcher as the first African-American assistant press secretary in the United States. So we were there. Andrew Hatcher and I were history makers at that time. Well, he called Pierre Salinger over. Pierre had a handful of papers, and I guess he had just briefed the reporters. But he called Pierre over and said, "Pierre, I want you to meet someone." Pierre came on and said, "Yes, Mr. President." He says, "I would like for you to meet Abraham Bolden. Say he's from Chicago, and he's the Jackie Robinson of the Secret Service." And I was just so flattered, and it was just made me feel so elated that the president had recognized me to bring me in service to such a great position to hold on behalf of the American people. Now, I became somewhat disenchanted with the operation of the Secret Service agents who were surrounding the president. I noticed that there was a lax attitude surrounding him. I also noticed that there were several agents who were on the detail that really hated the president. They hated what his principles were. They hated what he stood for. They hated him as a man. And most of these agents were from the Deep South. There were about 3 or 4 of them on my detail. And I heard him refer to our President of the United States with such terms as nigger dubber and such things as that. And I also heard when I was in Massachusetts with the president at Hyannis, Massachusetts, I heard one of the supervising agents tell other agents that if the president was an attempt to be made an assassination on the president of the United States, that he would not react, and he was suggesting that they not react to a plot to assassinate the president. Now, this was rather disgusting to me because I looked at it like this. We had a job to do, whether or not the president was for civil rights, against civil rights. He may have been a Ku Klux Klansman or whatever, but that didn't make any difference because Congress has given us the sole responsibility for the safety of the President of the United States and not John F. Kennedy. Our obligation was to the presidency of the United States, and I could feel and I could see that many of the agents had lost focus of that fact, that we were doing a constitutional obligation in that we were supposed to be protecting a constitutional presidency of the United States and not the man. So I thought this was rather urgent, and when I left Hannahsport in July of 1961, I went straight into the office of the Chief of the United States Secret Service, and I talked with U.E. Baldwin concerning this, because I thought these were horrendous statements that agents surrounding the president should make, and I thought that somewhere along the line, these attitudes might cause them to not do their job, and as a result, the successful attempt to assassinate the president would be carried out. I so much told the chief. There were other signs that that the president was very much disliked. There were undertones, as I said, that agents didn't want to be on the detail, that they were going to stand down if any shooting should take place or anything. Not only that, but the supervisor of the detail, Harvey Henderson. We were at Hyannisport in our little quarters where we were living in a little house about 7 or 8 miles outside of Hyannisport, Massachusetts. And Harvey Henderson was drinking beer. He was near drunk, looked at me and told me that, he says, "Now, Bolden." I says, "Yes, Harvey." He says, "I want to tell you something, and I don't want you to ever forget it." He says, "You're a nigger, you were born a nigger, you're going to die a nigger, you'll never be anything else but a nigger, so act like one." Well, I had to make a decision at that time because I knew that how he was. I had been warned about him, and that I knew that one of us had to leave the detail. So when I went to the Chief of the United States Secret Service, I asked that I be relieved from the detail and shipped back to Chicago, Illinois, where I became a field agent. Now, rumors were about from 1961 through 1963. We were investigating several serious conspiracies to assassinate the President of the United States. And one of the main conspiracies that we were looking into happened in Miami, Florida, when the Secret Service was advised of a telephone conversation that had taken place between an ex-Ku Klux Klansman whose name was Miltier and one of our Secret Service informants. And they were discussing the best way to assassinate President Kennedy. And Miltier had stated that the best way to kill a president would be to shoot him from a tall building with a rifle and a telescopic sight. And this was the method that Miltier said it would be done. And not only that, when the question arose as to, well, what would be the consequences of it, when the Secret Service jump on us right away, he says, no, there'll be a patsy who's going to take the charge. All right, so now the Secret Service in early October and November of 1963, we knew that these conversations were going on, and we knew that these conspiracies were going on. Also in Tampa, Florida, there was a conspiracy that was revealed to the United States Secret Service, to the extent that some arrangements were made that were different in his protective procedure when he went to Tampa, Florida, in order to not have the president assassinated. So now in Chicago, where I was stationed, we had a serious threat in 1963 in October and November of 1963, where a Cuban organization here, the DRE, made a statement, one of the members, Echeverria, made a statement that the president was about to be assassinated. Now this was early November of 1963. And the president was to come to Chicago for one of the football games, the annual football game. I believe it was between Army and Air Force, or one of those two. But anyway, he was supposed to come here. That venture was canceled. After that, the Secret Service agents here in Chicago blew a surveillance on the north side of Chicago, and the people who were conspiring to assassinate the president, who had come to Chicago with several rifles with sights on them, they vanished into thin air. Therefore, by us not knowing where these people were, his appointed schedule to Chicago, his visit to Chicago for the football game had to be canceled. Of course, the public was not told that that was the reason. They said that something had come up, or he had had the flu or something like that, but we were told different. A United States Secret Service agent knew why that venture here in Chicago, which was to be around November the 2nd, was canceled. So I became very, very suspicious of the actions of the details that were surrounding the president. When the president came to Chicago in March of 1963, I believe that was March of 1963, the conduct of the Secret Service agents who were to protect the president was lawful. Instead of getting a good night's sleep, the next morning, when the president was due to arrive in Chicago, I understand that the agents had spent a whole night on Rush Street in Chicago drinking and watching girls tabletop dance. And when we went to the meeting to be scheduled for the president's visit, you could just many of the agents who were there reeked of alcohol. Some were definitely hung over. And it was just a sight of young men who had not respected the obligation that had been placed upon them by the American people. And I began to complain about it. I complained about it to my special agent in charge here in Chicago, Mr. Martineau. I complained about it to the inspector of the United States Secret Service, Inspector Kelly, and I complained every chance that I got, because I had this feeling that the President of the United States was about to be assassinated. I believed that that was going to happen. And in November, on November the 22nd of 1963, my suspicions came to bear. The president was indeed assassinated at noon in Dallas, Texas. And the Secret Service at that time had spent quite a many hours before the president was assassinated. The night before he was assassinated, they had spent many hours at one of the nightclubs there in Dallas, Texas. Now, I knew that this was occurring, and I knew that when the agents, whenever they went anywhere, the first thing that they did when the president went to bed, or some of them on their breaks, would go and drink alcohol. And therefore, they were mostly rendered to be inept if it came to protecting the president. Not only that, the rumors that the Secret Service would stand down if an attempt was made on the assassination of the President of the United States, to me, was of such egregious lack of duty and respect for their position. that I complained to the supervisor in the Secret Service, who took no action until after the president was assassinated. Now, having this information after the president had been assassinated, I watched as President Johnson formed the Warren Commission, allegedly to investigate those who had assassinated the president. But I also noticed in reading some of the record that we had a little magazine they called a record, issued to the Secret Service on a weekly, sometime bi-weekly basis, where we would discuss different topics that appeared in this magazine. And I noticed that the Warren Commission was not interviewing some of the suspects that we had definitely identified as having engaged in a conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy. So I took it upon myself to represent the American people and to represent my fellow man in trying to go before this Warren Commission and explain to them some of the things that I knew that had not been published and that had been denied by many of the agents, some of the agents who had already testified before the Warren Commission. Now, I went to Washington, D.C. in March of 1964. This was after the president had been assassinated. Now, one thing I did not know, and that was the fact that in November of 1963, Katzenbach, who was the Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General, taking Robert Kennedy's place somewhere around the 26th or 27th, had issued a memo saying that Oswald had to be seen as the only assassin of President Kennedy. So it seemed like to me that the Warren Commission at that time, I trusted them. I thought that they were trying to get to the bottom of it, not knowing of this memorandum that had been written by Katzenbach. So when I tried to contact the Warren Commission in order to testify and to let them know, J. Lee Rankin happened to have been the general counsel at that time, let them know some of the details and some of the things that I had heard about a Secret Service stand down, about different things that they had said about the president, and that the fact that they disliked the president, I thought that they needed this information in order to further investigate and look into the activity of the Secret Service to see whether or not the Secret Service should continue to be delegated the function of protecting the President of the United States of America. On that day, on the next day, May the 18th, after I had surreptitiously tried to contact J. Lee Rankin through going through the White House switchboard, I was brought back to Chicago in an emergency situation on the pretext that a counterfeiting plant had been discovered in Chicago. I was needed back in Chicago immediately to go on an undercover assignment to continue to round up these counterfeiters. Of course, that was a pretext and a lie. When they brought me back to Chicago, they held me incommunicado from about 1 o'clock, the time that we arrived in Chicago, until midnight of May the 18th of 1964. And at that time, they told me that they were going to arrest me for the commission of a felony for soliciting a bribe. Now, you have to understand that the people from whom I was to solicit a bribe, one of whom I had arrested twice and had a case pending for the counterfeiting of United States currency. The other one, Joseph Spagnoli, I had been a part of his arrest on May the 9th when he was rounded up for the possession of counterfeit $100 bonds and certificates. Now, these are the two gentlemen, or the two convicts, that they put on the stand in order to say that I had, through Frank Jones, had solicited him to go to Joseph Spagnoli and ask Joseph Spagnoli for the sum of $50,000. Now, they didn't say that anything had changed hands. There was no recordings of me doing that. They had a piece of paper that I allegedly typed and gave to Frank Jones, yet my fingerprints were not on that paper. And they put this convict, Frank Jones, on the stand to testify that I, in fact, handed him the paper, but my fingerprints were not there. Well, I knew what it was all about. But it confirmed in my mind when the first jury, I was taken to trial, and the first trial ended somewhere around June the 12th or so. No, July the 12th. I was taken to trial, and during the jury's deliberation, the judge, J. Sam Perry, called the jury out and told the jury that in his opinion I was guilty. The defendant is guilty of counts 1, 2, and 3 in the indictment. And then he told the jury to take into consideration what he had just said and to continue to deliberate. Well, all thanks be to God, that jury did not find me guilty. So we asked for another judge. The judge set the next trial for August the 3rd of 1964. He refused to remove himself as the adjudicator of a second trial. So when we went to trial and presented our evidence, the second jury began to deliberate. Now, knowing that this judge had already tampered with or tried to influence the first juror, we had asked that he remove himself or recuse himself from another trial. But as I said, he did not. But during the deliberation of the second juror, the judge at 5:30 p.m. on or about August the 11th of 1964, called my attorney and the United States Attorney, Sykes, before the bar and told them that he was tired and he was going home and he was going to release the jury and they would begin deliberating the next morning, and that he was closing the courtroom for the night and releasing the jury. And he also wrote that in one of his orders. Now, on my way home, thinking after I had been escorted out of the building, me, my attorney, my brother, my wife, and many other who were spectators were escorted out of the building, and the doors were locked. The judge and the jury, the Secret Service, and FBI agents were still in the courtroom. When we entered the courtroom the next day on August the 12th, the judge had disbanded the jury, and the only person there to represent the whole jury was the foreman and maybe 2 or 3 other jurors. The jury was not there. And he opened the so-called sealed verdict, which of course contained a verdict of guilty. I was not surprised at that. But what I was surprised at was the complete failure of the judicial system to give an American citizen a fair and equal trial, an impartial trial, as demanded by the Constitution of these United States of America. Now, I have been reared as a young man to respect the law, respect order, respect the Constitution of the United States. And here I had fallen victim to a judge who did not respect the Constitution of the United States, who refused to give me a fair and impartial trial. Now, I was very disappointed and disgusted when that Joseph Spagnoli, who had testified against me in the trial in August of 1964, went to trial himself on his own case in 1965. And the day after my birthday, which was January the 19th, 1965, the day after, which was the 20th, Joseph Spagnoli was on the stand testifying in his own trial. And his attorney, Frank Oliver, asked Joseph Spagnoli, had he ever committed perjury in a trial? Joseph Spagnoli says, yes, I committed perjury in the Bolden trial. And he said, Frank Oliver asked him, who was it that told you to commit this perjury? He said the government told me. The Assistant United States Attorney Richard Sykes told me to commit perjury, and he also wrote out what he wanted me to say in the Bolden trial. And I have that paper with me, at which time Joseph Spagnoli pulled this document out of his pocket, and it was introduced into evidence with some dates on the paper that had been changed in order to make me be at a specific time, at a specific place, which we had tried to refute during the trial. Now, when we went to the Court of Appeals, we argued the case in October of 1965. The judges, the three-judge panel, when we came to the argument that the government had built the case against me, that they had fabricated a case against me, and that the United States Attorney's Office, headed by Edward Hanrahan, was the reason that this whole thing occurred. We didn't bring up at that time the matter of President Kennedy because it was the opinion of my attorney that it was too dangerous at that time to broach that subject, and that what we had to do first was to refute the case that had been brought against me. Now, when the chief attorney, the chief judge Hastings of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeal, called Richard Sykes in, who had prosecuted me, called him before the bench and says, Attorney Sykes, there have been serious charges have been brought against you in that this complainant, appellant, says that you solicited perjured testimony in order to gain a conviction against Mr. Bolden. Now, Richard Sykes, being an officer of the court, looked at Judge Hastings, the chief judge of the United States Court of Appeals, and took the Fifth Amendment, saying that I refused to answer, Your Honor, on the grounds that my answer may tend to incriminate me. I was flabbergasted. The lawyers who had cases that were pending in the Court of Appeals, they were overawed, and during the recess, each and every one of them who were there to argue cases for their clients came and shook my attorney's hands and said, you have just won your case, hands down. Because they couldn't recall at any time where conviction had been upheld by a court of appeal after the attorney refused to answer whether or not he solicited perjured testimony in that trial. Yet, in December of 1965, near my wife's birthday, the Court of Appeals upheld conviction. They affirmed the conviction I appealed to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did not grant certiorari, and on June the 26th of 1966, I was picked up by the Marshal's office from my home on orders of Judge Perry and immediately incarcerated in the Cook County Jail here in Chicago, Illinois, without giving the benefit of getting my things together. He said, the judge said I had to be incarcerated right away. I had not murdered anybody. I had not committed any harm to anybody. The accusation was not supported by any evidence except the mouth of two convicts. And yet the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court did not grant me any relief, and I have not been granted any relief under the Constitution of the United States, which I have sought. Neither have I been granted any expungement of the record. Neither have I been granted any pardon, adverse pardon, or whatever. And I have suffered this indignity for over 50 years now. My wife has gone on to glory. She did the best that she could. She was the best wife in the world. My children have been very successful. All of them have been model citizens of the United States of America. And I have been constrained to live with this shadow over my head in the same neighborhood, in the same house for the past 50 years. And not one government official has spoken on my behalf, even though I have written my pens dry. And that is so disgusting to me. And it let me know that there was something that was very dreadful about the assassination of our president. Not only did they assassinate President Kennedy that sunny day in Dallas, Texas, but they assassinated a family. They assassinated a man's reputation. They assassinated the Constitution. They assassinated not only one father, but two fathers. And I think that that is unforgivable. And they haven't deterred me whatsoever, because I feel that we have young men across the water at this very time. And they are lying in foxholes. And many of them are coming back in body bags. Because they're over there sacrificing their life so that we can have a modicum of freedom in America. And anyone who is afraid to stand up with their life at stake and give it for freedom and democracy doesn't deserve to live in a freedom and democracy. And we see that deteriorating in today's time. We have become a lost society. We have become a godless society. We have become an unjust society. We have become a murderous society. And it's going to take people who are willing to suffer, people who are willing to die here in America in order that our freedoms be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you for telling your story. We're going to do what we can.
Now I'll take questions.
Yes.
Yes, I'll take questions if you have any.
Okay. I'm sorry, but there's an echo. But things I wanted to ask you was if you see elements of your story in other whistleblower stories.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. What happened to me once that they put me in prison is a travesty that is very seldom done. I had arrested many people who were locked up in prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. They sent me to that prison, which was filled with people whom I had arrested and I had testified against and had convicted of crimes against the United States of America. Now, can you imagine the suffering that my wife went through, and my children went through, and my neighbors went through, and my friends went through, knowing that they had incarcerated me with the very people that I had testified and charged for violations of the Constitution of the United States and the federal statute. To lock me up with those type of individuals, I think is unforgivable. And they did not stop there. They subsequently, after I had been incarcerated for about a year, they sent me to Springfield Medical Center in Springfield, Missouri. And I knew from reading the history of other dictatorial and fascist governments what they had in store for me.
Right.
Because I was content on believing, in my belief, that we had had a coup and a change of government from a democracy-minded government to one of fascism. That we were moving in a new direction with the assassination of President Kennedy. And that's what this was all about. So when they took me to Springfield, Missouri, I knew what the plan was. Because normally what they do, they would kill you in three ways. They would declare you insane, they would kill you physically, or they would kill you monetarily. Mm-hmm. You would go broke fighting them, or they would break you down physically or mentally. And so after I had served approximately 8 months in Springfield Medical Center, on July the 7th of 1967 at 3 a.m. in the morning, 2 uniformed guards came to my bedside at 3 a.m., touched me with the big 5-cell flashlight and said, "Let's go." They marched me over from the prison farm where I had been assigned over to the psychiatric division. And forced me to take mind-altering drugs, which I brought about and explained in my book, The Echo from Dealey Plaza. They forced me to take mind-altering drugs in an attempt to interfere with my collective ability and intelligence and reasoning ability in order that they could destroy me as a man. But as I bring out in the Echo from Dealey Plaza, they're not gods. They're not gods. And so I had a protection that followed me. And it delivered me out of every trap that they set. And it has sustained me for these past 50 years. Now, sister, you don't know how it feels to be convicted of a crime and carry that burden on your shoulders for 50 years after trying to live, as being a black man in a white society. When I was sworn in as a Secret Service agent, they had checked my family background all the way back into the slave ship. And if they had found one inkling of anything wrong in my background, I never would have been sworn in as a United States Secret Service agent. And you have seen, and we have witnessed what happened in the 60s and 70s after President Kennedy was assassinated, the government fell in fascist hands. And we see from day to day people who were convicted after President Kennedy's assassination. Many of them have been found not guilty after having served 30 years, 27 years, 20 years, 15 years on the death row for crimes that they did not commit. So that was a change in America with the president's assassination, with the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, with the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, with the assassination of Medgar Evers, with the assassination of the three gentlemen who were lynched in Mississippi. This world has changed at that time. But it's up to people like me to make a new way for the generations that are to come, to cut a new road to face this threat, the threat of the demolish of the Western civilization from within is more important now in this day and time than any ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or any other threat from any foreign country. We are a lost nation at this time, as I said before, because injustice must be balanced on the same pole. And we have, within the past years, since the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, been slowly moved to a state of military police dictatorship. And I think that the Americans, most of them would agree with me, but they don't agree with what action should be taken. They are fearful. We are fearful people. Grown men are scared. They'll go over in Arabia, they'll go to India, they'll go to Taiwan, they'll go anywhere in the world and kill other people when death is at their doorstep, if they only knew. We have to band together in brotherhood and love and trust. And we have to build a new world order based upon the concepts of compassion and truth, generosity. That's our obligation. If we want to sustain a civilized society, we have to change directions immediately, or we're going to go down into one of the most horrendous destructions since Sodom and Gomorrah.
Thank you, Abraham.
Very welcome, sister.
Your story is so moving that I almost don't know what to say. Except I'm sorry.
Well, you have to understand that sometimes, and most of the time, trouble comes to a person because he calls it upon himself to become qualified to do another thing that he had hoped to do. In other words, trouble prepares a man to do what is really in his heart. And I sincerely believe that this period of my life served as one of the greatest teachers that I have ever had. And it has brought about a knowledge and a spiritualism and a knowledge of metaphysics, a knowledge of the universe that I could never have gotten had I not gone through this, you know. In Isaiah, it says clearly, I have refined thee, but not with silver. I have chosen thee out of the furnace of affliction. I don't know of anybody who loved his people, who came to be of service to his people, to be of service to mankind, no matter what the nationality, the race, the creed, or color, who have not had to suffer. You have to suffer because suffering is the great teacher. And within that suffering is a lesson to make you a better person, to make you a more spiritual person, to make you a more godly person. And I thank the Lord above that it has had that effect upon me. I don't want to hurt anybody. I wish the best for the United States Secret Service. I wish the best for the judicial system. But I also wish the best for my fellow Americans who have suffered greatly these last 50 years along with me. It hasn't been a gravy train for any of them. Many of the rich have lost their homes in fires and floods. Their sons have been killed, their daughters have been killed. And suffering has gone throughout America. It's a part of life. We have to suffer. That's what we're here for. And so in doing what they did to me, I thank Almighty God that He blessed me in order to sharpen my wit and to cure the ills of mentality that had faced me in the past and has brought me like a raindrop floating back to the ocean, back in His arms of wisdom.
Can you tell our listeners the name of your book again?
My book is called The Echo from Dealey Plaza, and it has in there my autobiography. It can be purchased either by writing me. You can contact me at a.bolden at sbcglobal.net or www.echofromdealeyplaza.net.
Okay. How about your official website? There's a lot of information on you out there.
Yes, there's quite a bit. There's quite a book. I'm on Facebook. They can get me on Facebook. There's quite a lot of information on Facebook, and there's www.echofromdealeyplaza.net. That's my website.
Thank you. Did you want to take more questions?
Take more what?
Would you like to take more questions?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Let's see if we have any in the chat room. Let's see. And in the meantime, while I'm checking the chat room for questions, tell us also about your bid right now to be pardoned.
Well, there is a petition that is circulating on Facebook, Pardon Abraham Bolden. And it can be reached on Facebook. And there's also a petition that can be reached on my email site too, a.bolden at sbcglobal.net. I also have several books that are autographed. There are softback copies of my book that go from DJ Plaza. I autograph them. If they will, the price of them is $20 for an autographed copy. Just write me at a.bolden@sbcglobal.net, and you will be advised as to how to get the book. The book is also on sale at the larger bookstores and at Amazon.com. But as I said, the whole purpose of writing the book was to let the American people know and to try to instigate other agents to stand up and tell the truth. Tell the truth about what happened to our president on November the 22nd. They know. Tell the truth about it.
Right.
They go on the YouTube and they talk about the girlfriends that President Kennedy had, or the many times that they saw women on the elevator, or about this, about that, about Jacqueline, about everybody. But the public wants to know what the heck happened on November the 22nd, 1963. Mm-hmm. They want to know about that. That's what the public, the American people, are more concerned about their liberties than they are about the morals of President Kennedy.
Yeah, it doesn't make a difference what he was doing. Nobody deserves to be assassinated, and people who are paid to protect them should be doing that. So
it's true.
And because you complained so much, it seems like you got the attention of whoever was behind it, and then they set you up to shut you up.
They did.
So
that's right.
In the beginning, the press covered this, but they've tapered off over the years. And
yes, the major press has tapered off. As a matter of fact, the major press never did really pick up my trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been able to develop contacts and to go on radio shows. I've gone on TV shows, but not the international kind. But I'm satisfied with that because I'm not doing this for the money. I'm 79 years old, and what would I do with $1 million now anyway?
Right.
You understand? Right. The corn has already been popped, so there's no need of buying any butter. So you can understand that.
Yeah, it's about the truth.
Yes, it is.
And that's important to us too. Myself and my listeners, that's our major quest. And because the mainstream media doesn't cover the truth, we decided to go ahead and do it for ourselves and share it with each other.
Yeah. Right, that's right. Well, if they don't, they're going to be very sorry, because what we're in now is an era of deep propaganda.
Yes.
Of massive propaganda. There are people who want to take us into a third world war. And they want a war Armageddon, so they think, because they feel that might is right and guns are power. Mm-hmm. But I think that Almighty God's got something in store for them. They'll show who is the real power behind the throne. Because God made it, and He breaks it.
Well, I sure hope something better is in store for us than where I see things going.
No, it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Believe it's going to get worse.
There was so much hope when President Obama was elected, and that hope seems to have really dwindled quite a bit. The policies of Bush seem to have continued, and the threats, and we keep losing our rights and not really getting safer for it.
Yes, that's right.
It's more like security theater.
It is. It is. Now, the president, we know that he rides on the ship, but I don't think that he guides the ship.
Right.
There are others who are really in control of our government. And as President Kennedy brought out several times, that we have to be knowledgeable and cognizant of these so-called secret societies who want to take over the whole world, the New World Order, the whole world order, Illuminati, or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. There are people who want to control of everything on this earth.
Yes.
And it's already been spoken for. It said the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So that's already been spoken for. They can forget about that. And so far as threats and things like that are concerned, you can kill a body, but you can't kill a spirit. And that's what I operate on, is spiritual.
I understand that. I relate to that very much. I call them the psychopaths in charge, but we all have different ways of identifying it. But yeah, they want it all, and
yes,
most is not enough. They want it all.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
And it's hard to believe that that really exists until you experience it for yourself.
Yes, that's right. It was very shocking to me, the things that happened that were very much at odds with what I had learned in history classes and civics classes, what my mother and father had taught me, concerning peace and how to respect the government and things like that. Of course, I still ascribe to what I had been taught. But with the knowledge that I have now, I understand many things that happened, and my mind has been open to the ancient teachings, and I really understand what's happening right now at this time. And I thank God for that.
Well, your strength is inspiring, and I can relate to your story, but a much smaller scale than that, because you're not rewarded for telling the truth.
No, you're not, and I would advise Snowden, wherever he is, don't come back to America. They got something waiting on you. Won't wait.
So why do you think the press is covering him so much then? Because he's the one of the day, or why is he getting so much attention?
Well, they were covering him, as you recall, they were covering him almost daily for a while.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they stopped covering him. I think that's because he's releasing some material. See, we don't get all of the news in America. The news, you might as well forget about the news on TV, radio. It's all propaganda. And he's releasing materials that are very dreadful to any right-thinking American, one who wants freedom, justice, and equality. He is bringing out some things about the government that really people would rather not know because of the fear that it places within them. So I think that the media is in cooperation with some of the people that want to control everything, and that they at the bid of those organizations who have band together to accumulate all of the wealth of the society and the world.
And so your solution is, this is a spiritual thing. We have to come together and say no.
Well, we are going to come together. That is going to be the solution. That is going to be the solution because of the universal mind. There's such thing as a universal mind. It's manifesting itself right now into this day. And that will bring us together. The universal mind, the overmind, the mind that is beyond the earthly mind. We're in the age of Aquarius now. And this Aquarius is the manifestation of the spiritual and the overmind. That mind which is linked with the higher soul, the higher self. And that's the age that we're seeking now. We're in a period where the wheat is being separated from the chaff, where the good are going to be separated from the bad. And this is the real Armageddon. It is a battle with self. It is a battle between the good and bad within mankind. And this is the battle of God, as he told men of our prophets. This is my fight. We fight not against flesh and blood, but against wickedness in high places. And we can defeat that. The wicked mind, the reprobate mind can never defeat the good mind, the mind of God, the mind of peace, the mind of love, the mind of charity. And it's people such as I and people who study with me who are going to bring this about.
Do you mind if I take you back to when they tried to break you?
Mm-hmm.
Did they give you drugs? Did you say they gave you drugs?
Yes, they gave me 150 milligrams of a drug called Elevil. And when I first chose to take that drug, they told me that they were going to give it to me in my behind if I didn't take it in that little plastic cup that they had, a little tablet in a plastic cup. The first several times that I took it, it made me very dizzy. It made me feel like I was a little bit high. And I knew that I could not let them succeed in interrupting my power to reason, my power to think, my power to understand, because I had seen other inmates. As a matter of fact, one of them, James Robinson, I saw him actually kill one of the other inmates. And he was in the same psychiatric division that I was in. And he had to think to breathe. So it's just that bad. Once they start you out on the minor drugs, then they get heavier and heavier on Therazine and these type of drugs that really take away from you the ability to maintain yourself as a human being.
So, this is where you discovered that you had some sort of protection, even though what they were doing to you is what they were doing to you. You had some sort of protection.
I knew that all my life. There were signs all of my life. And that I had some type of special protection, that I could foresee certain things, that I had some gifts along that line. And I've been taught through visions, been taught by ancients through visions who teach me about different tribes in Africa and teach me about different type of ceremonies. And it's become true. To give you an example of it, during the time that I was on trial, I had $50 left in the bank. And I was seated in the living room with my wife, and I was discussing it with her. the fact that it would be better for me to go out and go to the penitentiary where she could get some aid outside. And with me in the house, she could not get that aid. She recommended that I not surrender myself and go to the penitentiary for that purpose so that she could make a living. And she, as we sat on the couch discussing whether or not I should go and surrender myself because of lack of funds, the doorbell rang. And the postman had in his hands a box. In that box happened to be a certified check for the amount of $2,500. And so that gave me a lot of leeway about groceries. It just like something fell out of the sky. And so things like that have happened to me all of my life. I had a precognition that President Kennedy was about to be assassinated on November the 18th when I was in Washington, D.C. And people thought I was insane because when I came back to Chicago and told some of the workers around there that I had a precognition because there were certain symbols that were surrounding the White House, they thought that I was insane, like I said, until the 22nd of November, when it actually happened. So I've had these things all my life. My mother, as I bring out in the echo from Dealey Plaza, I was playing baseball one day and I heard my mother's voice. I was about 5 blocks from home. And I heard my mother calling me. And I was playing out in the center field on the baseball team. I threw the glove down and ran all the way home for 5 blocks. And it was hot that day too, about 92 degrees. When I got home, I went around the back door in the little house that we lived in, and my mother was sitting on the back porch. And she had gotten a sliver of porcelain up under her middle finger on her right hand. And she was sitting there with a pair of wire pliers trying to pull that porcelain sliver out from under her fingernail. It was up in there about a half an inch. And when I walked up on the back porch, she says, "Abraham, I've been calling you and calling you." I was like her favorite son. I said, "I heard you, Mama, I heard you." And I took those old wire pliers of my dad's, and before she knew it, I had pulled that splendor from out that porcelain from up under her fingernail. And she talked about that until the day she died. How that she had called me and how that I had heard her some 5 blocks away from home.
That's a special connection.
Oh, yes, that was a special connection. And then the day that she died, in 4/4/74, April 4th, 1974. The day that she died, I was working at Tool and Engineering Company. It was about 4:30 in the morning. I became so ill that I couldn't stand up. I became weak. I was a supervisor at this company, quality control supervisor. I told my assistant that I was going home because I didn't feel good. So I put on my regular street clothes, drove down the Dan Rand expressway. And when I entered the back door, my wife was on the telephone. She said, "It's for you." And I took the telephone from my wife. My sister, Fayetta, told me, "Mom just died. She just died." And I felt, I didn't know what had happened. I just knew that the whole world was going round and round, and it was disorganized. Everything was so chaotic. And then it began to pass over when my sister told me, "Mom just died." She was talking long distance from East St. Louis, Illinois. And I sort of knew it because I felt the suffering of my mom who died of a heart attack. I've had 3 heart attacks myself. I have 3 stents. I've had a back operation. I've had 2 back operations. I've had cancer. And that's how this problem wears down the body. It just eats away at you. Even though you try to ignore some things, they're buried so deep in the subconscious that it still has an effect on you. And so I just give glory to God that I'm still around, and I hope to be around until this is cleared up.
Well, I hope we can help with that. We're going to get it out there.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Bolden, would you like to stay with us until 9?
Well, let's see. 7:33. I'll stay until 9. Yes,
well, where are you?
I'm at home.
What state are you in?
What seat?
Are you in Central Time?
I'm in Illinois.
Okay, so
I'm in Chicago, Illinois, the Windy City.
Okay.
You ever hold on to your hat? Put one hand on your hat and the other one on your pocketbook.
Well, it's only till 8 o'clock for you, so, but it's not till 9 for me. Did you need to take a break or anything? Or are you good for 30 more minutes?
No, I don't need to take a break. I'm good for 30 more minutes.
You want me to tell you a story about my similar connection to my mom?
I sure would like to hear.
Okay. Well, my husband and I were living out in California, and my mom, who's from Louisiana, was living in Pennsylvania, where she still lives. And this was 2002, late April, May 2002. And I heard this voice in the middle of the night that said, "Go now, your mother needs you." And I told my husband, and we just started packing, and we left. And we drove all the way from Oakland, California to central Pennsylvania. And when we got there, my mother was in like a spiritual crisis, and she was suicidal. And she told me, because it was the first time in her life that she was like honest with me about that. And so I called my sister, and we just stayed with her until it passed. And I just feel so fortunate that I listened to it. I listened to the voice, and my husband also listened to it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, things like that has happened to me all my life in various situations. They sure have. As a matter of fact, when I was working at Tool and Engineering Company, this was in April of about 1983, I had a vision that the company exploded. And I went to work that night, and I told the men on my shift that I had had a strange vision. And this was in 1983, I believe. And in the vision, there was a lot of fire. The walls of the company were destroyed. The machines, as the screw machine company, were all bent up like toothpicks. There was fire everywhere. And so I got out of the building by taking a certain route. I was in the building in the dream. All right, so when I went and I told these my workers on my shift about the experience that I had had in the dream, they were saying, "Oh man, that's just a dream." Now 7 days later, 7 days almost to the minute later, I was getting ready to go to work at Tool and Engineering Company, and one of the workers called me up and said, "Man, what you doing?" I said, "I'm getting ready to go to work." And Brother Calhoun said, "There's no need of going out there, ain't no job." I said, "What?" And he said, "You know that dream you had?" I said, "Yeah." He says, man, that company blew all the pieces, turned on the television. And I turned to channel 5 and there were fire trucks everywhere. So I jumped in the car with my wife and I went down there on 19th and Peoria, 18th and Peoria Street here in Chicago, Illinois. And it was identical with what I had dreamed. And one of the workers who was in the building at the time, his name was John Russell. He came up to me and said, man, you saved my life. I said, what do you mean? He said, you know how you told us that you got out from away from that fire and came down the steps to the outside of the building? I said, yeah. He said, that's the route I took. And that was the only way out of there for me. I would have burned alive. He said he took that same route that I had seen. Another one, a Mexican whom I had to sign a document that what I'm telling you is the actual truth. And he lives in Chicago here because I know people are very hesitant to believe things of a spiritual nature. So when Castro is his name, Hector Nuevo, he came to me and said, man, you saved my life. He said, I slid right under the door. He said that the ceiling was falling, and this was a huge company too. It killed 3 men, blew them to smithereens. And so that was 2 people who got out of that building in a way that I told them would be open for them to get out. And it so happened that, I had explained it in such a detail that the foreman who was over the shift at the time it exploded accused me of blowing the place up.
I thought about that.
But the insurance company doing their investigation, they found out that one of the thermostats on one of the furnaces that we melt the aluminum in had blown up because the thermostat was off. Instead of the 900 degrees that it was reading, it had overheated something up like 1800 degrees, twice the amount of heat. So it blew. So everybody became sad. They sort of avoided me for a while. They were looking at me strange. Said, this guy's, I don't know, I don't know about him. He said the plant's going to blow up 7 days ago and it blew up. Then this foreman said, man, you blew that up with your mind. I've been watching you. So things like that happen, They happen like that. But I do believe that I've been blessed with the gift. And I'm trying to cultivate that gift now so that I can help people, American people, this nation. And that's what a man should do.
I believe it too. You know what? Whether you get that pardon or not, you're already free.
Yes, well, like I said, I'll keep working on it. You can't save everybody, but at least thing you can do is make some ice cubes. A few ice cubes. I can't save everybody, So we're about the way, about the way of truth. That's the only thing that set us free is the truth and love, because as the scriptures say, God is love, you see. And I really believe in that. And as a matter of fact, I've written 2 other books. One book is called I'm Just Saying, which is a philosophical book of different topics, and then the other one is From Men to Gods, showing what the 7 days is really saying, what they really mean. Many people misinterpret the 7 days. Well, while I was away, I was taught about what the 7 days actually mean. and I was taught almost daily in the spirit by elderly gentleman. He lived in a building that was a small house, one-room house. It was like in the jungle, like in a forest. It was the only house that was around there, and you had to go through a lot of trees to get there. And that house had 3 steps. And as I ascended the 3 steps, he would open the door, and I would walk in. The only things that were in that whole room was 1 candle and 1 book and a table. The book was on the table and the candle was setting near the center of the book, but not on top of the book. It was just above the book, but near the center of the book. And that was the only lighting that we had in that whole room. And he would read a verse and he would explain it to me. But there was not a word spoken. It was like telepathy. That once I woke up, I would understand everything that he said, and I could go to the scripture, and no matter what scripture it was, whether it was Hindu or whether it was the Bible or whether it was the Quran or whatever it was, I could go there, and it would be just like he said, but with a greater explanation. We talked about the Akashic scrolls. We talked about maybe I better not say too much because he may not come with me. But anyway, he taught me quite a bit about the 12 tribes, about the universe, how it was constructed, how long it took to construct it, the number of atoms in the earth. Many things he taught me. And so I know that he gave it to me so that I can use it to the best interest of my fellow man. And that's what I'm doing now, is gathering together the information that I can use to bring peace upon this earth, because that's what we need. Peace only going to come through love and knowledge. Wisdom comes from God.
One of the things that's hardest when you go through something like what you went through is to balance that being at peace with how things are, but also rightfully wanting to change them. So what do you do not to get ahead of yourself and get stressed out about it?
Well, as I said, it's just like that drop of water that falls from the cloud and falls into the ocean. Once that you get back to the ocean, then the ocean has control. And you're no longer allied with the material. That drop of water that became into the cloud, that it rose and ascended to the cloud, was at one time so mixed up with the material that it lost its identification. And now once that you put away the body, then you put away the body and the mind becomes stronger, and as the mind becomes stronger, the overmind takes over and sends you into the celestial realm or the third heaven. And once you reach the third heaven, then wisdom takes over, and wisdom comes from God. But you get to that wisdom through science and art. Science and art is earthly. Wisdom and understanding is spiritual.
Do you ever hear that Willie Nelson quote, that music is one of the highest forms of spirituality?
Yes, and I was a musician too. You notice that most of the prophets were musicians. That's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. It's a reason for that, because everything in this world are vibrations. And once that you break the etheric code of vibrations, then everything else that associated with vibration is open to you. Thought is nothing but a vibration unmanifested. That's all. And when we manifest our thoughts, then it appears. And we can learn to control those vibrations by the vibratory rhythm of our mind. That's not an easy thing to do, and I'm close to that now. You can learn what you see is not really there. What's there is not what you really see. Everything is light. Everything that you see is an expression of light. And we only see 1/10 billionth of what's there. That's what I was taught. So we have to march on towards glory, and the unmanifest is the most manifest. I know it's sort of weird, but that's the way it is. The unmanifest God is the most manifest. The hidden truth is the most manifest. There is nothing hidden but truth, which is the most manifest. You don't understand that, do you?
I do. Because not believing the truth doesn't make it not there. It still exists.
If you understood what I said, you're on your way. You're on your way. It took me years to get there. You know, it usually takes 49 years to get there.
Well, I'm almost
like
there.
I said, yeah.
I'm 45.
I see. You're a little younger than my daughter. My daughter's 58 or 59. I can't keep up with birthdays. 45. So you don't look it on your picture. Is that a recent picture that I'm looking at?
Yes, it is. Yes, I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't eat horrible things. Yeah.
Me either. I don't drink or smoke or stay out late, anything like that. I'm usually in bed at 10 o'clock at night. I do a lot of, I study about 12 to 13 hours a day, and I do a lot of writing. You ought to hook up with me on Facebook, and you'll see the type of writing that I do.
I will look forward for it, and I will share it. And I really appreciate you spending your time with me tonight and telling us your story and giving us some of your wisdom.
Yes, well, one thing I'm sure that it did, it taught you how to operate this this communication system. You came out pretty good. I have sat sometime 15, 20 minutes while the person on the other end try to find out how to operate their Skype system, and you know they have different systems that you can even go Skype on Facebook if you know how. You can do it, and you can do it on Skywalker and different type of systems that they have. I sat here half an hour before we went on the show one night, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Hey, what's old man to do anyway?
Well, this is my new home. The People's Internet Radio is my new home, and you're my second guest, and so I'm just getting back into a producer type of role. I got kind of lazy over at my other station where they produced it all for me, and so I got to be back on my toes again and figure out everything and how to do it. So.
Well, I hope I made a good presentation for your audience. It's really been interested, talking with you, and I appreciate your invitation to the show also. And just let the audience know that there are a lot of lessons in the Echo from Dealey class. See, a person, once he reads a thing, he gets out of it what he puts into it. Mm-hmm. He understands the thing at the level of his thinking. If he's thinking at a natural level, then that's what he understands. If he's thinking at a spiritual level, that's what he understands. If he thinks at the celestial level, he gets something altogether different out of the same words. Such it is with Echo from Dealey Plaza. If you read it, you'll know that you heard that story before.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. While I was researching you for this show, I had just found out about it, so now I need to read it and then have you back.
Yes, I appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. Now the thing about, I mailed you a book. I'm sure I did. Yes, I mailed you a book. You should be getting it shortly.
Okay.
Did you ask me to send you a book?
No, I didn't ask you.
You didn't? Okay, well, let's see. I have to check my list and see. I mailed out several books today. You may have been on the page. If I didn't, just send me your mailing address and everything. I'll make sure you get an autographed copy of the book.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I want to thank your friend Alan Kennedy for suggesting you as a guest. A lot of my guests come on as suggestions by people who are on my Facebook page and who listen to my show. So I try to get people on who people want to hear from and want to hear their story. And your story is absolutely incredible, and it's something that needs to be shared.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's my honor and pleasure to have had you on the bridge. And I will read your book, and I will have you back, and we will talk again.
Yes, I appreciate it very much. And it's been nice talking with you. And tell Alan I said thanks a lot also.
Okay, I will.
All right.
Mama got mad at Papa, 'cause he didn't bring no coffee home. Mama got mad at Papa, 'cause he didn't bring no coffee home. She said, old man, don't you know you're doing wrong? She said, excuse me, that's what he told her. Son, I won't do that no more. Just please excuse me. I won't do that no more. You know I'm gonna buy you coffee here, and I'm even gonna buy you a coffee stove. If you shut your mouth, baby, I'll buy you a coffee house. If you shut your mouth, baby, I'll buy you a coffee house. You know, Mama was sitting around town like this, saying, what is this coffee house mess all about? Mama, she was sitting there seeing people go out and in. She began to drink coffee, said, I'm going back here again. You know, Mama was mad, but I sweetie seen she drank black coffee and it was without a drop of cream. You know, she was crazy about that coffee house. That's the reason him and Mama just begin to get along, because you know what this coffee mess all about.